Molly McHugh, former advisor to Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili, and former FBI double agent Naveed Jamali. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining me on this Sunday evening. Ambassador, I'm going to start with you. Do you see this as a direct threat from President Putin?
Yes, of course. These are new weapons. There were several of them announced. They're all designed to attack the United States. And, you know, the torpedo that he announced, the nuclear-tipped torpedo, that's designed to attack American citizens, not military targets. That's designed to come into the San Francisco Bay and to kill millions of Americans. So and these are real things. I've studied these things. I worked at the National Security Council several years ago. We knew of these weapons, but that he has announced them now, it represents I don't call it a return to the Cold War. I think I call it the hot peace, but this is not a quantitative arms race. This is now a qualitative nuclear arms race, and he's just put down a couple of markers to demonstrate to the world that he's been expending a lot of money to develop these new nuclear weapons.
So Molly, Putin says this is what he has, but then a lot of people out there questioning, we know President Putin, we've seen this before, is he in fact bluffing, Molly, or does he really have an arsenal capable of rendering the U.S. military defenseless?
Well, I think Ambassador McFaul is correct that Russia's nuclear doctrine has been developing in very specific ways. Their capabilities have been developed in parallel to the doctrine, which does specify different uses, including smaller tactical level nuclear strikes. But I think we have to see this speech in the context it was given. This was an internal speech. This is about Russia's elections.
Right.
And I think that is really critical because Putin outlines this very weak nation that needs an external enemy and then talks about Russia's international might. This is how he has maintained control for 15 plus years. And this is the context in which this comment is given. So I think not responding to it in this one instance is actually the better strategy, because what Putin is telling us is the only Russia he thinks he can win an election is a Russia at war with the West. The real war is not about nuclear weapons right now. It is about Russia's asymmetric and hybrid tactics being used against the West, being used against the United States. Things were only just starting to unravel after the 2016 elections, and seeing what they're doing across Europe to our allies as well. And that's where we need to be focused right now. Russia's had ICBMs that can hit the United States for a long time.
So Ambassador, then why would we have such a sort of tepid response from the U.S.?
Well, I actually disagree. I think you need to react to something like this. These are new weapons, and I do agree that this was a speech for the presidential election, but he's going to win that anyway. There's no mystery about that. Right. And a couple of things bother me about what he announced. Two of these weapons are not covered by the New START treaty. Because they're not ballistic weapons. They're hyperglide vehicles on the one hand and this torpedo on the other. So that means we don't have any inspections rights. We don't have any controls on the number that are deployed, and that changes the nuclear balance. And I think it does. I mean, just if this had happened 20 or 30 years ago, this would have been page one news, right, and the President of the United States would have been obligated to respond. The lack of the response, I think, is an incorrect decision by the president.
Yeah, instead it's sort of been crickets from the United States. Naveed, at this presser, from your perspective, was this the president speaking, or was this a former KGB spy, which is exactly what Putin used to be?
I think, I think for Russia, look, the United States, we look at this and the Cold War ended, we won it. For Russia, it simply did not cease to end. They continue to view this as their main adversary. And look, one of the things we're talking about, just to go back to nuclear weapons very quickly, is the development of the B-61 tactical nuclear weapon. The advancement or the continuation of having a tactical nuclear weapon, especially amongst NATO. NATO is still a nuclear alliance, is something that perturbs the Russians greatly. For the American context, we look at that and we say this is just normal course of action. From the Russian perspective, they view this as an incredibly aggressive stance. So this is the problem that we face in the United States today, is that we look at the Cold War as being over. We look at Russia as not really prior to 2016, not really an enemy, not really a friend. For Russia, they still looked at the United States as their main adversary. When they recruited me to collect military-grade intelligence. You only collect military intelligence if you view that military as a threat. Since the Cold War, the stance the Russian military has had towards the United States has not missed a beat. And what we're seeing here is simply a continuation of the idea that the United States remains the main threat, and that means that their capability and their intent will remain aligned against the United States for the foreseeable future.
Well, and we talked about this a little bit, but I want to play a part of it. One of the only comments from the U.S. did come from State Department spokesman Heather Nauer. I want to take a listen to this, and then we'll talk.
It was certainly unfortunate to have watched the video animation that depicted a nuclear attack on the United States. I mean, that's something that we certainly did not enjoy watching. We don't regard that as the behavior of a responsible international player.
So, Molly, how do you think Putin actually sees this response?
I think what Putin wanted, based on the fact that he set up an NBC interview right after the speech, was an American reaction to these nuclear threats. The footage that he showed during his speech is, somebody documented this morning in an OSINT site, is like something from 2007. None of this is new. It was a staged action in order to gain a response from the United States. Again, this is a domestic speech for the Russian audience, and this is what Putin wants us talking about. And if that is the thing he wants us focused on, often the best thing is to look somewhere else for the real threat.
Naveed, and then we have former Obama chief of staff. He was on the Meet the Press this morning saying Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell actually watered down a statement on Russian tampering before the 2016 election. I want to take a listen to this, and then we'll talk.
What I know is that the intelligence community approached the entire leadership of the Congress,
the so-called Gang of Eight,
in early August 2016. Several members of that group did not take the briefing until early September 2016. Indication number one of a lack of urgency. Number two, the president asked the four leaders in a bipartisan meeting in the Oval Office to join him in asking the states to work with us on this question. It took over 3 weeks to get that statement worked out. It was dramatically watered down. You can ask Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, even the speaker.
And it was watered down on the insistence of Mitch McConnell?
Yes.
And nobody else?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any understanding as to why? Did he not believe the intelligence?
I don't.
So, Naveed, over the last couple of weeks, the Obama administration has sort of gotten some flack for not responding to the Russian meddling when they first figured it out. And now, obviously, you're hearing this about Mitch McConnell. Are we becoming too lax when it comes to the cyber threat that Russia poses?
Well, so it's a good question. It's a fair one. And I think that some of the actions that didn't get as much coverage are the fact that, President Obama, right before he left office, did two really important things. One is he threw out essentially the totality of the Russian intelligence officers, those who are posing as diplomats in the United States. And the second thing is he actually put the election system on the critical infrastructure list. And prior to that, he and the head of the CIA both warned Putin against directly involving themselves in physically changing votes. So there was a very clear message given to the Russians. I think it's very dangerous that what the Russians did was basically catch our blind eye in politics. And look, and the other thing, just to go back very quickly, the idea that while there may be politics involved, what we've seen is a tamping up of Russian military activities, whether it's Syria, whether it's flying incredibly close and provocatively to our warships or our airplanes. Russia has taken a very aggressive stance. And I think that we can talk about the partisan stuff, but the part that doesn't necessarily get covered as much is, as the ambassador is talking about, is really a change in terms of their tactical operations from a military standpoint, specifically against NATO and specifically against our military. And that's very, very worrisome.
So I want to end on this, Ambassador. The intelligence agencies say that Russians, they actually wanted Trump to win the election, and their tampering was an effort to make that happen. Have they gotten anything tangible from this, aside from sort of a kid's glove approach to the tampering itself?
Well, I'd say two things. On the one hand, the hope that President Trump would deliver all kinds of things like lifting of sanctions, dismantling NATO, even at one point he talked about recognizing Crimea when he was a candidate. They're very disappointed in that. I saw lots of senior Russian officials at the Munich Security Conference. They're very disappointed on the foreign policy side. But on the domestic side, the fact that we're fighting amongst ourselves, we are distracted, we don't even react to major international crises and security threats anymore, that is an achievement. Our withdrawal internally and not being a leader in the world, that is an achievement, and they partially helped to create that.
All right, Ambassador Michael McFaul, Molly McHugh, and Naveed Jamali, thank you to you all. Still to come, everybody, Trump's threatened tariff war. How is the world